Welcome, everybody. This is Steve.
This is Randy.
Hey, cheers, cheers, cheers.
Everybody,
Uh,
Bible over
a little
beer.
backwards to break. Sorry about that. Yeah, well, welcome to Bible over beers, Ruth. We
Ruth.
did the toast first rather than the chapter book. So yeah, this is a book. The pretext to the book, or the precursor to the book, says the transition from the priest line to the king line. So pretty exciting. It's a short 4-chapter. We'll try to do justice and keep it shorter, but it's so fun to talk about. We could go on and on forever. So I'm going to shoot it out to you, Rand. Did you want to roll it, or you want me to start it off?
This is really, I would say, one of my favorites so far. And I love the way this is written, because it really reads as a good story. Just a very interesting book, only 4 chapters. So I advise everybody pick up the Bible and at least read Ruth. 4 chapters, you can get through that. Please follow along. So chapter 1, Naomi loses her husband and sons. Now, we don't know who Naomi is. I mean, she has not been mentioned at this point. Again, this is just a whole separate book with a separate story. So we're going to learn about Naomi, your husband, and sons. So it starts off, verse 1, in the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So I thought this was kind of important, because they did mention the judges ruled. And what was really going on when the judges ruled? There was a lot of turmoil, a lot of unrest, a lot of famine, a lot of bad things, a lot of sinning when the judges were ruling. So
Shake your head.
This family was affected by it.
Exactly.
So
they're affected by it so much. They're affected by it so much.
They're bad in their hometown. They're in Bethlehem in Judah, right? Things aren't good, so they thought they'd up and move and see what's going on in Moab.
And I'm going to jump in here, and I know it's so apologize, because Zoom, we can over talk, because it's it's hard to see, but there's a significance to Moab. That's the people that didn't help them on their exit from Israel. They're not to intermarry with them or anything, and as we'll learn in the story, that
right,
they end up doing stuff like that. So I digress. Back to you.
Yeah, and I guess really everything was broken down at that point. I mean, dogs and cats were getting married, so it was mayhem.
Yeah, mayhem. So mention the fun. We're back to the names. Do you want to mention Naomi's husband's name?
Elimelech.
Good job. There we go. Randy nails it out of the park. Elimelech. Yep, exactly.
Yeah, they went with their 2 sons. Why don't you do the sons?
Mahlon and Killian.
There you go. Mahlon and
I think it's Mahlon and Killian.
Mahlon,
and they were noticed. I've never heard this called that. Ephrathites.
Ephrathites.
Ephrathites. Well, they're the tribe Ephraim, which I always thought they're Ephraimites, but this is the first time I saw it, so it could be just me. But yeah, but so they moved to Moab, like you were mentioning, and I don't want to steal any of your conversation, so just jump in when you want, but fill in the gaps. What I noticed
from that to verse 3, chapter 1, they're talking about the 2 sons had married. So one name, I'm sorry, the wife's name was Orpha, and the other was Ruth. Ruth is easy to pronounce.
Ruth, and that a very English sounding name from.
Yeah, right. So they lived there for about 10 years. The sons were married, and then all of a sudden, verse 5, both sons died, and the husband, and she was left alone with her 2 daughter-in-laws. So very tragic, very quick. But it's actually, Steve, it's funny, because I read this book 4 or 5 times this week. That's the first time I really picked up that they were there for 10 years.
Yeah. Well,
because they don't even mention if things were like better in Moab for them. I mean, they did stay, so I'd have to assume something, but life must have been a little better there than back home.
Yeah. Well, so that's what I said. It was significant, because it was bad enough they moved to a land that they weren't supposed to really be intermixing with, which we found in Judges was commonplace. And then add insult to injury, if you want to call it that. We can't really call it insult and or injury, because Ruth, who is a Moabite woman who they're not supposed to marry ends up being, a significant
Right.
part in the lineage of Jesus. So, but they married them, and then the interesting thing I just wanted to share. I noticed that Elimelech died shortly after they moved there, and then 10 years later, as the sons passed. So there was, but this poor lady, she's, back in these days, right? The men had all the power, as we learned in Ruth and Deuteronomy and other places. So go on.
And in that time, and again, I don't know, said after they had lived there 10 years, it doesn't say that the sons were married 10 years.
Wow.
Just says they lived there 10 years, and neither one of them had children with their wives. So
Yep. So that was kind of interesting too. They left Bethlehem, and after everybody passed, the boys and the father passed, that they're like, hey, we're gonna go back to she heard Naomi heard that the Lord was providing food for his people. So I think the rules and stuff in the Israel cities and towns, they had the gleaning rules that we've read about before. So she was going to go back there, but she wanted her daughters to go back to their families. It's, don't take care of an old lady. You need to get remarried. You're still young. If I have kids, are you going to be patient? If I even have the chance to get married again, let alone have kids, you going to wait around for another, 50, well, back in the days, maybe it's only 12 years, but till he's of age to marry, assuming she has a boy, so.
Right, exactly.
So
yeah, I thought that was interesting. It's like, oh, you think I'll have more sons that you can marry? Probably not. So I'm just going to be a widow the rest of my life and live this terrible, lonely existence. Just basically, she's kind of resigned herself to that.
Yep.
So
go ahead.
So the one daughter-in-law says, all right, I'll go back home. She packs up and goes. But Ruth was a little bit different. Ruth really felt in her heart that she needed to stay with her mother-in-law. Now, was this a calling from the Lord? I mean, she just felt this urge in her heart to stay by her side and go back to Bethlehem with her.
I want to say yes. And it probably is there written that we're not interpreting maybe, but I would say definitely, because Ruth 1:16, and I said Ruth, yeah, it is. Yeah, Ruth 1:16. She says to Naomi, where you go, I will go. And where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people and important, and your God will be my God. So I think that's big to me. Your God will be my God. She's leaving the Moabites, where the gods or anything, the bad gods. And she's willing to go with so I thought that was big. So.
Very compassionate. It just sort of speaks to her character, really.
Yep.
They have a bond.
Yep.
So, when Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go, she finally just said, okay, come with me. So they traveled back. When they arrived, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women exclaimed, can this be Naomi? So obviously the town was very happy to see Naomi return.
Yeah, she's
what did Naomi say about her name? That was in verse 20.
Yep. Don't call me Naomi. You want to finish it?
Go ahead.
Oh,
call me
yeah, call me Mafra. How do you spell? I can't read my Latin. What's the name? Mapra?
Mara.
For the folks here to understand my context, this is my writing, and so I apologize in my notes. It is Mara.
Mara means bitter, so she wants to be called bitter because the Almighty has made my life very bitter, she says.
Well, seriously.
Hey, in the beginning of this, what's the very first, start of this book? They travel somewhere, and she instantly experiences death and tragedy, which really isn't uncommon to the Israelites, but that's what happened to her. So her whole life was upended, and now she's bitter.
Yep, and it can't blame her. I wouldn't blame her, but I think the story starts to take a shift for the better. A turn, I guess, is a better way to put it. So chapter 2, titled Ruth Meets Boaz. Um, uh, well, interesting. So they're in the town and they just happen to pick. So I think it's divine intervention, you'd say. Ruth picks this farmer, this land, and she goes out and starts gleaning because it's barley season, right? She's gleaning, and Boaz comes by, who happened to own the field, and of course, I guess everybody's confused who Boaz, but we'll get to who Boaz is. He owns this field, and he's kind of taken a liking to Ruth. I think he's quite fond of her. I think he thinks she's quite appealing to him. I think he's an older man, but anyway, so I thought it was pretty neat. So when he asked who that lady was, the people said, well, that is the daughter of Naomi.
Mhm.
Whoa. So he's like, he's happy about that. So
Yeah.
he knows Naomi, obviously, because he's a distant relative of hers. So he's happy. And I'm assuming by now he's probably got, maybe he knows that she's single. I don't know, that the Bibles can be pretty, I wouldn't call it raunchy, but pretty risque in the stories. And this one would not disappoint. But,
He
go
mentions
on.
that,
You want to add to this?
yeah, he mentions that he had heard, good things about her, what she is for his mother-in-law. So, he really looked fondly on her. And as far as like any type of romantical, you could kind of read into that a little bit. I do think it's interesting though that he kind of called her his daughter at one point. My daughter.
Oh,
I don't know if that was just, I don't know if that's something that an older gentleman would just call a young lady that he liked, kind of referring to as a daughter.
yeah, that was interesting. I didn't happen to catch that, so I'll have to recheck that out. But I did know that he was very impressed with the fact that she stayed with Naomi, which was a big honor. I mean, because again, remember, the women, they aren't entitled to anything. Well, they have some rules for them, as we learned in the other lessons, or other chapters we read about and discussed. But so
Yeah.
basically, he liked her so much, he invited her to come eat. Give him some bread. And then he said, hey, please, because apparently it's probably not safe to go gleaning because of a woman on her own out there, and you have the men working, and I think bad things happen. So he found he was fond of her enough to say, hey,
Mhm.
please stay at my farm and glean, and we'll
That's right.
my man servants or my men won't bother you. And try to think what else.
Chapter
What
2,
else?
verse 12. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you
Yeah.
be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. So that was basically Boaz just saying to her, hey, what you've done for your mother-in-law is such an honorable thing, and may you be blessed for it.
Yeah, so I was thinking they had food. One of the things I thought, and I'm guessing because I lived in the South for a while, but she was able to eat some bread and dip it in wine vinegar and then roasted grain. So I'm assuming the wine vinegar was maybe electrolyte stuff. I think it gave you some, it parched you,
Oh,
gave
I never heard
it
that.
quenched your thirst. We've learned. I think we'll learn when Jesus is on the cross that he's given a sponge with vinegar. I
Really?
think it hydrates you better. I've
Okay.
not found that myself, but I think we have better things today. But yeah, so anyways, then she ended up gathering what an ephah of grain that day from her fields. Apparently that's a pretty big chunk, which is 30 pounds apparently in a week. So she returns home from the fields, and Naomi learns that Ruth was with Boaz, and this is where the thing starts. This is where it gets a little risque. Very happy. And she said he's one of the guardian redeemers. Did you kind of understand what that was? What those are?
Yeah, I mean, that's an incredible thing. And actually, I think that is mentioned in the Torah. That is something that, they're supposed to do, is look out for the downtrodden, and the people in need, they're supposed to help. So,
Yeah.
obviously, that's a role that he's willing to play.
Yeah.
The Lord
At
bless
this
him,
point,
and
he's
her daughter-in-law. He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead. So obviously he's been, it was verse 20 in chapter 2. Obviously he's been a man that, he's still the man that she remembers from before
oh
they
yeah,
even went there to go live in Moab.
very good character, very good character. So that's why I think she was really, and she knows that he's single. So I think as we lead um into chapter 3,
Yep.
I found this one I'm lacking fancy words, so I'll keep it simple. Naomi wants Boaz to become smitten with Naomi, or with Ruth, I'm sorry.
Yep.
So so she says, put on, your best clothes, your dancing shoes, your makeup, and your best cologne, perfume, I guess would be, and go down to the what is it called? The sheathing, the threshing room.
The threshing room.
Yeah, and stay hidden, stay out of sight. Don't let anybody know you're there. Of course, she's full of perfume. I don't know how that happens, but when they get done, they'll eat. It's traditional to eat and drink, and he'll obviously pass out. And when he does, what do they have to do? What is she supposed to do?
That.
Yeah, but what is she supposed to do when he goes to sleep?
Yep, that's chapter 3, verse 4. When he lies down, note the place where he is lying. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what to do. He will tell you what to do.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, if he's such a good man, obviously he's not going to do anything, out of wedlock. Am I correct? Or
Yeah, I don't think that's not what I'm implying. I'm implying that he's got this young lady, so that's what we learned. So first we learned the tradition. That's a tradition to uncover a man's feet. That's say I'm interested to you. I think it's a very strange tradition. There's probably way more to it. But
so Naomi, this is something that's popped into Naomi's head. She's like, "Hey, I got an idea. Go lie down." Okay, so this is some tradition that they do. Okay.
Yeah, they elaborate on that. Yeah, and then of course when he gets up, he sees her, and he was humble, or not humble, but he was happy that she, out of all the men, because she's apparently a beautiful woman, picks this guy.
Yeah.
Yep. And then she asked him to spread the cover of your garment over me, since you are my guardian redeemer of our family, which is accepting that he's, if he likes her, that's what he does. And I don't think any shenanigans, of course, in the Bible, as we does not hold back on shenanigans. So I would say that they didn't have any shenanigans. And then so he stayed in that place and snuck out at dawn, obviously not to embarrass him.
Sure. What was really most important to him is they don't mention anything about Ruth being this stunningly good-looking woman or anything. What is important to him is that she's an honorable, good person.
Oh, yeah.
That's really what he's attracted to.
That's for sure. And I don't think her looks hurt much either. So at least because of his statement about
he says in verse 10, the kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after the young men, whether rich or poor. So yeah, he's saying, hey, you could have had your pick.
You could have the pick of the litter, and you pick Boaz, which, from what Naomi disclaims, he was. He's two things, right? He's very important because of the land. He's the guardian redeemer. So that was the most significant. So I don't know what the most.
Obviously, he has a successful life. So why is he sleeping on the threshing room floor?
Yeah, well, I thought I'm gonna assume that's you and I, born in a generation where we don't thresh wheat. I know the Amish folks do up around here. So my guess is it's a tedious, it's probably hard work. And it's probably a traditional for the guys to stay up all night and do it, and just when they're done,
you got to harvest fairly quickly, right? It's probably a small window, and so you're just working a lot of hours. And instead of going back home and crawling in bed, you just lie down, take a nap, and continue on.
Exactly.
Cool.
Anything else in chapter 3?
chapter
mean,
3.
he did feed her, yeah.
Now, before we get to chapter 3, Ruth did ask Naomi, "Hey, how did it go?" And she told her everything that Boaz had done for her. So yeah, Naomi was ecstatic.
He
Sorry,
was
Steve.
happy. Yeah, so before we go to 4, you mean, yeah, because that was, I mean, believe it or not, that was chapter 3 of 4,
Oh,
right?
okay.
It doesn't
Sorry
matter.
about that.
Nope, it doesn't matter. It just saves me from losing my place when I'm editing. So, and it doesn't matter because it just nothing else matters, and I will not say anymore. But back to it, yeah. So interesting too. I mean, also, I mean, no, maybe a little insignificant, but he when she left, he poured 6 measures of barley into her shawl.
More
So the
food.
guy, so apparently he wants to fatten her up for the kill,
There you
in
go.
a good way. Chapter 4. Take it away, sir. Or do you want me to?
Mary's Ruth. I think we knew this was coming. So the guardian
Yes.
redeemer, one of the roles of the guardian redeemer is when Naomi's family left, they still own their property, right?
Yep.
So that
There's
property would have been passed on to the men, which would have been her sons, but her sons are dead. So now it's Naomi's. So basically, Boaz has a revelation that he's like, oh, wait a minute, there's another guardian redeemer that has
first right.
first right to that.
Yeah, he's
and
close.
and then if he doesn't want it, then Boaz could step in. So he calls a meeting with some elders, and this man comes. I can't remember if they mentioned his name or not.
No, nope, they didn't mention his name at all.
And he explains to him what's going on with Naomi coming back and her daughter-in-law, and basically, do you wish to purchase this land? Will you redeem it? And the man agrees. And then Boaz then mentions, go ahead.
I was going to say I'll add some levity to it because again I think this is Boaz. This he wants to win this game, right? And he has the cards in his hand.
Yeah, he held that back, didn't he? He held that one back.
Yeah, he holds it back. He didn't put the conditions. He wanted to make it fair. But there are conditions. You have to take on the widow and then her Moabite daughter-in-law that comes with it.
Yeah.
And that was the key part. Ruth is a Moabite. Again, that brings us back up. This is significant. And then he's like, whoa, I'm out. He basically, he says, well, he was afraid to jeopardize his estate because of bringing a Moabite into his estate.
Yes.
So, but which is
now it's interesting because why is Boaz not worried about that? He seems to be leading a pretty righteous life. So why is he willing to break that rule? I wonder.
I think because of, and this is my opinion. So I'm thinking that because she's a Moabite, it's off the table. But what she did and acted towards Ruth was unbecoming of a Moabite. It was almost like the Good Samaritan. That makes sense. A lot of people forget what a Good Samaritan is. The Samaritan people hate the Jewish people, so they never helped anybody. One did, and that's how we got the Good Samaritan. So same with here. I think
the Lord's word and how he worded it. You know what I mean? It was just basically do not marry outside of your own tribe.
Yeah,
correct. That's how he put it. Right? Never said except unless, but he's still willing to do that. I find that curious.
Well, that's the thing again, and I'm going to add some. We're almost wrapped up with the book, and I wanted to kind of go over some takeaways that I had, and that could be one of the takeaways I'll bring back up. So remind me that if I forget. So interest, because again, I want to discuss this a little bit because there's some stuff outside of just sharing what we read. But what was funny, the next thing is okay, he declined. This is the man, the first ordered guardian redeemer declined because of what we talked about. And then what I thought it was an interesting tradition they do. He took off his sandal and gave it to him. And that's how they in land things. It's like, okay. I thought it was odd. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, One party took off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was a method of legalizing transactions in Israel. No
And
contract.
it had to be, yeah, I think it was done in front of people because Boaz announced, this was 4:9, chapter 4, verse 9. Boaz
Yep.
announced to the elders and all the people,
Yeah.
basically, and I'm going to paraphrase now, he bought the land from Naomi and all of her, her husbands and sons, or husband and sons, and then the property, which the property of Elimelech, Kilion, Mahlon, and taking Ruth as his wife. So he kind of professed that to the crowd, which is pretty bold. Well, he wanted everybody to know. Apparently, a lot of stuff was done in public, so you can't say somebody did something shady. So,
Yep. No, and yeah, I mean, a lot of witnesses there. So nobody, anybody tries to go back on their word. Well, you've got 10 elders there that heard it. So, and I thought this was cool too, how it said as far as purchasing the property. Now he's talking about Ruth's widow, Boaz's, and he says, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from his hometown. Today you are a witness. I thought that was great. We're going to keep his memory alive.
yep. Yeah. It's, sorry, I keep saying yep, and I watched this video back and I'm like,
Nah.
But exactly. I'm not certain how it works, but I'm assuming that the land stays under Elimelech's name, heritage, which is what we'll see. So basically, he bought the land and he's going to take marry her. So this is where I think it's kind of interesting. There's this build up. It's it's a short book, so everybody will enjoy reading it. But it's a short book, and it kind of builds and builds, and then it just drops. Like right now, he gets married, and then so chapter 4, verse 13, Boaz marries Ruth, and she bore a son. I mean, it kind of goes into he slept with her and had a son, so on and so forth. And then I thought this was interesting. Verse 16, Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. And then the women of the living in this, the women living there said, Naomi has a son.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of just got my epiphany. They loved Naomi so much. That's why they were stirred when she came to town, and they were happy for Ruth. She's not reborn, but she's rejuvenated. She's got a lineage. Now she's got a lineage, and does she have a lineage? I mean, this is a very, 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 very important lineage, because Obed, he starts, well, he doesn't start it, but he's an important part of the lineage of Jesus. So Obed was the father of Jesse, and it leaves us outside of the heritage, descendants anyways, was the father of King David, which we will learn about in Samuel, which is our next chapter. Want me to quickly do the genealogy? Don't we care? Well, we care. I can't.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention too, I had to read that verse 16 a bunch too. Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. The women living there said Naomi has a son. I mean, she has a grandson. I don't know.
I get, so like I said, it just kind of, I guess Lord's epiphany. I just had the epiphany now when we're talking about it, that she was sonless, right? She lost everything. Now through she has a son. So it's not her son. They're not saying that she had the son. She has a son to continue her lineage.
So you look at Naomi now. She was called back home, and Ruth was called to go with her. And look how things turned around for her. I mean, it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, exactly. And then if you look at it, and it's so it leaves us with verse 18 through 22 of chapter 4, just the genealogy, sorry, not lineage, the genealogy of David. So it's Perez had Hezrom, had Ram, had Amminadab, had Nahshon, had Salmon, had Boaz, Obed, Jesse, and David.
So we're just really a couple generations away.
Yeah, so we're about to learn of the king line, which is David, obviously, as we know, and I can't wait to get into that because that's exciting. And this is one of those books. So this is kind of the overview I got from this. Is reading it. It's a good read. It's a short read. It's
right.
it's an up, a kind of like build up, and then down, and it's not, I wouldn't say down, but it's over with, right? And I
Right.
get where it's going, but this is, I think, I like in what I'm so far in the Bible, and I'll use my experience with math in college. I'm not a mathematician by any stretch. Math, as Barbie said in the 17, math is hard. I've always found that math, I was always behind in math. And then when I got to the next one, I'm lost, but I understood the prior study. This is what I'm finding out, what I'm thinking in the Bible. We're learning more as we go about what we read earlier on. And
Yeah.
like, I think we're going to learn more about Ruth and Naomi down the road. And like a lot of the other judges and folks, we're going to get much. I think I've heard the Bible's not in chronological order, it's in reading order. I mean, it was put out that way for a reason, so that's
Sure.
why we did the challenge. But that's my thing, is I'm excited to learn, just from being in church all those years. I'm hearing stuff about this, and now it makes this more understandable. I wish I would have read this close back then, you know what I mean? So I'm looking forward to it.
Puts things together, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, I told you I read this 4 or 5 times this week because it is only 4 chapters. It's a good read. Every time I read it, I got more and more out of it. But really, it's our discussion back and forth where I really start to kind of get into it. Because, to me, it was like, okay, it's an interesting story, but it's just sort of like, well, this story just kind of pops out. I mean, what's the meaning of why is it even a part of the Bible? Well, obviously, because we're leading up to, King David. I mean, this is where he came
By
from.
chance.
So,
Yeah.
very important to know that.
Yeah. So I'll say this. I might have an unfair advantage on this, only because I know who King David is, but you had to, at least, even if you didn't go to church a lot, most everybody knows King David.
Mhm.
So, I
I know
mean,
his name.
Goliath, David and Goliath. I mean, we had a cartoon, or what was that in claymation thing back in the day? That
Yeah, right.
David
David
and
and
Goliath.
Goliath.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, hey Davy, J Davy.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
So, but
All right.
yeah, I thought it was, again, it wasn't until our to start a conversation that, like you're saying, I got it. So the sun thing, to me, I don't think I'm wrong, but if I am, please, folks, leave us a comment. Because it's important. Again, remember, this is a very important line that we're going to learn about. So if she needed that sun line to, a son to continue that on. So, it's kind of funny how things all work out when it's, God's decision, and that's where we struggle. And maybe that's why, it's kind of why I'm doing this, is, as we discussed earlier, and not to drag this out, but, you find yourself sometimes, I have a decent life. I don't make, everything I want to make, and I don't have everything I want to have, but I have probably more than I need, and make more than I should deserve. But you have that emptiness sometimes, right? And this is, I'm looking for this to fill that gap. I've never really, so I'm thinking, I'm not thinking, I'm just excited about reading this, because every time I do, I'm getting it. So I'm reading it pretty much every day. So
Well,
that's big for me.
and you and I have talked about this before. My story was sort of like, I kind of thought the more I had, the more I made, or the bigger house or whatever. I always thought that would sort of eventually fill any type of gap I felt in myself. And it never
Exactly.
did. And I think you can probably go to one of the richest people in the world and they would tell you the same thing. It just doesn't solve that problem. It's finding happiness is not going to come from material things. It's just not there. If you're one of those people that's out there searching for it that way, don't bother.
Yep, that I would agree. I mean, not that I've, I'm not gonna say that I wouldn't mind finding out for myself. Just kidding. Although I'm not kidding. I mean, no, I wouldn't, because I do know that uh, there's probably reasons why God didn't make me rich, man. In the ways of the money, that's true, I should say, because I would say in many ways I have to
Yes,
say that I'm rich. So
you are rich. Absolutely.
so all
Yeah.
right. I thought it was great. I'm looking forward to Samuel. A lot of stuff in Samuel that I recall. I didn't read ahead like Randy did. I don't know if you wanted to share any fun stuff, or you don't
No,
have to share any
I
details,
just
but
started it last night around 7 o'clock. I got to chapter 13. And to be honest with you, the way my brain works, I can't even think of like one thing right now.
So
That's
that's
why I
why I
go
said,
back and read 2 or 3 times, because the first time just doesn't stick with me, so.
well, it's the same with me. And that's why I do the chicken scratch, because I'm going to be honest with you. I used to do, I don't have enough hours in a day to do the chicken
Yeah.
scratch, type them up. I like to type them up because I can read it, but if I go straight to keyboard, it never commits that to memory like writing did. And I think I
Mhm.
shared with you before, and again, we're about time to wrap up. But the last funny story that is in college, I was older in because my motto in high school was, why do things today, there's always tomorrow. Well, hey kids, boys and girls out there, do it today. That way you're ready tomorrow. But anyways, in college, I wrote notes and notes and notes, and it was funny because I couldn't read them. And I still get great grades because it committed to memory. So that's why I kind of switched back to doing my notes. I probably took more than I needed to, but it's important. I want to come back because I think if I could stop repeating, we're going to do some I want to do deep dives. Once we get through this challenge, I'm going to do some deep dives into stuff. I think there's some stuff we can go into. So
Yeah,
any final thoughts for you?
we got a lot of books to go, don't we?
Oh my goodness, just to get to the New Testament, which is, I can't wait to get to that. I mean, so
Yeah.
I shouldn't neglect, because we're gonna get in some stuff here. I mean, I remember Meshach, Shamrock, and Abednego. That's gonna be fun. That's coming up. Daniel and the lion, David and Goliath. I mean, we're gonna get into some fun stuff. So,
Cool.
but ultimately, the whole Bible's about one person, right? So,
That's right.
all
All right,
right,
buddy.
man.
Cheers, man.
Everybody, cheers.
We'll see you next time.
You all come back now. Yeah.